Scott Walter had a better day than anybody else on 1010. I mean, come on, Scott. This is like your career.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's your area of expertise here in the Tesla community. We're all looking so forward to it. And here you are surrounded by robots. I mean, talk to us
Yeah.
about the experience.
It was quite an experience. I mean, last week was a lot because, the night before we're dealing with Milton after having dealt with Helene. And then 1010 was the wee robot, which, the proof I got in, I get the brochure, I get the tag and everything. And there's probably a few other things. There's kind of a lot to go through.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's three things we need to talk about before we even get into the wee robot. So, or after, I mean, depending on what you do, because the first thing is like in honor of being on your show, of course, I'm wearing the honorary shirt, the same famous shirt we had up there. However, I think because of the wee robot event, I might have to retire.
I see.
Whoop, that's not very good. Knock something down there. This, the famous Optimus t-shirt with, as we can see, got to get it on down here, with the famous Optimus hands.
Oh man, I think I need one of those. Is there any way to still get those?
Oh yeah, I think you can still get them. It seemed to be one of Elon's favorite T-shirts. As a matter of fact, that's the shirt he was wearing at the Wii Robot event, along with me. So,
Right.
but we have to retire this T-shirt. So this is like the last time, and the reason is because of the new hand that they unveiled there.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be this hand anymore. They're going to have to use a different hand for being able to do that.
Right.
And so that's one of the things that we can probably talk about a little bit.
Yeah.
And then as you know, the hurricane rolled through and shut down my community for a couple of days, and no power. No, I mean, we have water now. Well, the power's come back on. I was like the only one with the power.
Yes.
The water is on, but boil advisory, and no one has internet except me.
Except you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I'll kind of go through what the experience of that was like. And because I was like, there was no rush to come back from LA to, you couldn't even,
Yes.
With curfews, you can't even get there. It's a mess. Like let them take care of that stuff. Meanwhile, hang out a few days somewhere else. So I decided to go to Boca Chica over the weekend.
Oh.
And yeah, and got to see the launch and the catch. IFT5. So there's a lot to debrief. So I'm telling you, this is going to be an action-packed episode. So where do you want to begin?
All right, because had Larry on Monday night talking about his experience at Boca Chica. Now I'm sure your experience could be somewhat different, but that would be, I would say, last on my list since we've already talked about that in detail. But my first on my list, in my opinion, what I want to know from you is your first impression being face to face with Optimus.
Okay, it was quite interesting because Optimus is not intimidating. At about 5'6", it's not like you're like, oh, there's so it was like, oh, okay, just a normal dude there. It was telerobotically controlled, but that wasn't really the point. The point was to get an idea of what the action is going to be like. And we were all hoping that the Grok integration will be done, so we don't have that yet. But it's going to be something like that you'll be able to talk with it, be able to do different things. And, the movement was pretty smooth. I was expecting to hear like when you go down industrial robots, they are loud. I mean, like their motors are running and they make lots and lots of noise. And I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't even hear the fan noise. Now there was like the din of the crowd and everything else, but these things would have been kind of noticeable. So it was moving around pretty well. And the other thing is like this high degree of confidence that you've got 20 bots out there walking amongst the crowd that could just easily fall over. And they were out there for about 4 hours, which meant that they had to be fully charged.
Yeah.
So, it's so that's already, an endurance test there itself. Now they were chaperoned quite strongly. I mean, they had like a security detail around them, probably because, the attorney said, look, you got to do that just to make sure for liability reasons, to make sure people don't get too close in case something goes wrong. But they were not tethered. Mm-hmm. And I understand Milan Kovac just put out a post like it fell only once, and that's because someone's handbag got caught while turning around, got caught up, and they're like, hold it forward. Okay. Now, you might say, well, that's a bad thing. No, that's a good thing, because these right now, these bots are not really certified to be close to people for interactions. Industrial robots are like, yeah, you got to fence them because they're just too dangerous. These cobots, which are kind of industrial robot light, they have a certification that allows them to be collaborative. I mean, be able to work near people, because if they do hit a person, they're not going to hurt them. Right. And their standards have been put in place for that. For humanoid bots, none of them are certified. And the reason why none of them are certified is for Kafkaesque kind of reasons, is because no standard exists yet, So it's like, well, no, you can't come in here and do this with the bots because they're not safety certified. It's like, well, where's the certificate? Well, we don't have one yet. It's like, well, wait a minute. And so they're all trying to kind of put this together. And one of the problems with industrial bots is that when they stop, you can't move them. They're really hard to move out of the way. So you can't get the arms to move. And so you want to make sure they're the back drivable. And that's because they have really, their gear ratios are very high. It's virtually impossible. The other thing is they're pinned to the ground also. I mean, they're bolted in the ground. So you try to move them, they're not going to move. A humanoid bot, you can literally push over.
Right.
Okay. So a lady's handbag was able to trip up Optimus. Good. Because if something's happening that, Optimus like walks you into a wall, I'm like, hey, you just push it and it's going to fall over and you get away. Okay. So these are some of the things that will make the bot safer and why you shouldn't worry about it, because they're literally going to be pushovers. Okay.
Yes, yes, right.
As well as being able to kind of move the arms and everything else. So that's an important thing. And it was kind of cool to be able to have that interaction and everything, realizing you're seeing like a deprecated robot. This is the end of the line as far as this design. And a lot of things are changing. So, the other part of my experience, of course, was a Cybercab, and anyone can look at the video that we did with John and something like that. I mean, that also was rather interesting. But there was an animation yesterday that I don't know how much stock we can put in it, but it showed, it actually came from Tesla Optimus, showing how many of the parts that come from the cars are in Optimus, like, the same camera suite, the same FSD, and also the battery management. And they showed a battery pack with something like 28 by 30 batteries in there, which is like, oh, is that the actual number that's in the Cybercab? Because you work it out and the numbers just aren't right. So if they're 2170s, there's like a 16 kilowatt hour pack, which is about half the size that Brian White expects it to be. Right. If they're 4680s, then it's like 80 then it's 80, 80 kilowatt hours, which means it's bigger than a Model Y, which we know it's not that. So it's like, okay, can you even trust it? And then when they pulled the batteries out to put in the Optimus, the battery count is wrong. Oh. Because it's like 10 by 9. And I know it's like 14 by 9 because I've seen the other drawings. I've counted what's supposed to be there from everything else. And I know they're 2170s right now. Right. And I don't think they're planning on putting 4680s. 4680s does not make sense in Optimus. Everyone's assuming that. It's like, it's a structural battery pack component. Optimus doesn't need to have a structural battery pack. It's also slightly longer, which means, your chest is going to be a little bit bigger. And there's a lot of reasons why it doesn't make, the 2170s make more sense and why I think is good. So you'll look at, if anyone sees that video, it's like, don't trust anything in that animation, because I tried working some numbers out and like, I don't believe it. But the Cybercab was great. It had the minimalization that I expected, because this is the thing I keep pointing out, what the analysts don't get. It's like, oh, you got to have a 4-seater. No one buys 4-seaters. Right. It's like, or no one buys 2-seaters. Yeah. And it just makes sense. And it's like, well, because there's always a driver. Right. And that's why cabs are set up that way. But once you take the driver out, you can take the whole front row out. Yeah. And then 2-seater makes more sense. It's like all these things you got to realize. It's not an ownership model. There's no need for a glove box. There's no need for a center console. There's no need for a frunk either. So you put all the electronics up there, you get more. It's like, so everything they did was like what I was speculating they might do. And I was really happy they did. And it turns out they put a visor in there. I was like, why do you need the visor? Isn't that like a driving thing? And it's like, it's a NHTSA regulation. It's like, but there's no drivers. Like, doesn't matter. It's like, so it's like they may eventually just say we don't need it, but there's like these certain regulations that a car has to have it. Same thing like it's got rear view mirror, and it's like, well, none of that stuff's in there because it's driverless, right? So again, it comes like to the cobotic standard, or the humanoid safety standard. They haven't figured it out yet because it's like new territory. So they're applying old standards to something that's new that's going to have to be addressed. That will change things. So I can go in a lot of detail, but everyone wants to know about really what was going on there. And the big thing is in the VIP area, they were displaying a new hand that at first looked like a spooky Halloween hand. And, like being Hollywood, I just figured, and it looked literally like an animatronics hand because there were just so many tendons going up there, moving thing around. It's like exactly what you would expect to see in a Hollywood theatrical production. And everyone was saying, well, that's the Optimus hand. I don't think it's, why would they put that on display? And I couldn't get in the VIP area. Okay. I'm not that well connected. So I could only see it off in the distance, but later on, when you get to see that a bit closer, I was able to say, okay, for sure it is, because I recognize the pedigree from the Gen 1, Gen 2 wrist. The hand is very different, but there's a slight twist on that variation. And if you want, I can go ahead and try to show a little bit of that. I'm going to try to do a screen share here.
Just
because
a second. You're going to have to wait for me. Okay.
Yep.
Now you can do it. Okay, go ahead.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and do something here. So what I'm going to do is share this at first. So I think you can see this. So this is the hand that we're talking about. And like I was saying, you're seeing a lot of tendons here.
Right.
And you could also see how the wrist mechanism is behaving from behind. So we're going to see up here that there is a pivot point there. There's another pivot point there. And I think as we go around here eventually, I think it actually may go back a little bit. We're going to be able to see how the actuation is done. Let's see, somewhere in here. There's like one angle that comes up. You're going to see there's a piston going up and down right here. And that's the thing that's actuating the wrist. And now you can see it right there.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
So there's the actuator body down here. There's a piston that goes up, and there's a connecting rod that goes from there to right up here. So then that is the lever that kind of allows the wrist to go back and forth.
Wow.
And so that's kind of how that's working. And then you can see all these different bundles that are going in there. And they've kind of, from the wrist mechanism, you see they opened up an access area here. They have a pivot point here by making a yoke that comes around.
Okay.
And that gives them adequate room to run the cabling through here. And you notice the cabling goes like on an X pattern. So these cables here more than likely over at the pinky. And this one here is more at the thumb.
I see.
Because you don't want to have like these large, small radiuses of curvature. So you don't want to get them pinched around there. So they're all kind of crossing through. And there seems to be a lot of bundles. I think there's at least 4 bundles. One of them we can't see back around the backside. And each of these bundles appears to be bundles of kind of 3 or almost 4. So it's like kind of 3 going around there. And then there's like a 4th one that kind of comes down. Like you can see this one here. That's almost like it belongs to that bundle of 3. So if you start doing the math, it's like, well, I see about 4 there. And, and if each of them are like bundles of 4, that's like about 16 tendons. And the thing is, tendons have 2 ends. They have the potted end up at the end that's putting on there, and the end that's connected to some kind of actuator.
Sure.
So that means you're talking about a boatload or a wrist or a handful. Actually, I hope you want to look what analogy you want there. That's a lot. And they can't do it in one place. So what's happening is they're having a ring, they're basically having a servo stack that goes down the forearm of 1, 2, or 3. And I've seen mechanical arms that do that before, that you can't place them all there because you have so many of them. So you stack them down, and these are going down to the next level and the next level below there to get them all in there. And you could see there's a little actuator right there that's connected to that is going up and down, which is pulling the puppet strings. So that's sort of the trick on how that works. And so you can see the displacement. And the question is how they're doing that actuation. Is it a typical kind of linear actuator with a ball screw, which is really complicated, or they've been able to simplify that in a way? Yeah. So it is very compact. It's more compact than what they had before. And because they're pulling down on it, it's much better than them reeling it in. I mean, the other way. And see, the problem with reeling it in is your tendons, they're going to stretch no matter what. So you have to come out with the material doesn't stretch. Right. When you come out with the material doesn't stretch, it doesn't like being wound around things. Okay. Oh. And there's a lot of effort and energy that goes into kind of wind it up because of the resistance, and they're just going to wear out. So you would have to use some kind of synthetic material that maybe doesn't mind being kind of wound up that way, but then it stretches. And when it stretches, it makes everything difficult. The difference between the tendons that are currently in the Tesla bot is that those are basically just wires that are going out there. And they go over pulleys. These are sheathed. So they're like bicycle cables that allows them to go through. And the question is, like, at some point, where do the wires come out And you have to be careful that the wires, if they're kind of running along something that directs where they're going to be, like a little pulley or something like that, if tension somehow comes off from that thing, it can jump off of that. I mean, we're all kind of aware of that it pops off and everything gets screwed up. So you have to do something to make sure that when the hand is opening and closing and it goes into some sort of resistance, that you don't accidentally have. So there's a lot of issues with tendons. Okay.
Right.
The fact that they've gone down this way when everyone else has said it's a fool's errand. So there's only one other company that is like, thinks tendon is a great idea. That's 1X.
Yeah.
All the others, you can look on the record, Figure has said, they've gone down there, they looked at it, they said that's not a way to go.
Yeah.
A lot of other companies, I'm not sure if Boston Dynamics did it, but Gordy Rose of Sanctuary, he was like, fool's errand, you shouldn't do that. He's like, so there's definitely this camp of like, absolutely tendons is the wrong approach. So we're going to have to see how this plays out and whether they did the research and whether they see what the issues are and how they're going to resolve them and what are going to be the way. Because one way to deal with the stretching of the tendons is that you compensate with software over time. At some point, they can stretch so far, you don't have enough range of motion. You have to go in and tweak them. And so it could be finicky. I think that's the biggest thing. And how reliable these are going to be. So that's really interesting approach that they've had here. Now they keep on saying this is a 23 degree of freedom hand.
Right.
And I'm like, I don't think it is. I think, or they say 22. I think it's 23.
Oh, I see.
Because you see right there, you see what my cursor is right there?
Yeah.
That there is a hinge right there for the pinky.
Okay. Yeah. All
right. And assuming all the hands are the same. So basically what they've done with the hands, and I'll unshare right now so we can sort of see what's going on here. Oh, where's my unshare? Stop share. Oh, there it's over here. Okay. So look at the hands. So you have what's known as flexion and extension. Okay. And that requires that down your base knuckles here have 1 degree of freedom each, and then your knuckles. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I got 1, 2, 3 knuckles on each digit. And so that's like your 3 doffs there. And then you have this abduction like that. And so that means you have to have a 2nd degree of freedom there as well. So there's 2 here, and then each knuckle is 1. So you can count that up, and each finger has 4. The same with the thumb. The thumb actually has one way down here that we don't see, but it's there. 1X has put it in there. Figure has put it in there. And also now Tesla's put in there. So the current Tesla bot only has 2 there because that seems to be what you see, but you get the 3rd one there. Plus you have that other movement. So the thumb always had 3 doff. Now they've gone to 4 doff. These are all 4 doff. 4 times 5 is 20.
I got it. Yeah.
Okay. And then they have the wrist. The wrist is able to do this.
Right.
And the wrist is able to do that.
Yes.
Okay. So you're adding those things in. And now that gives you a total of 22.
But the wrist.
So that's what they've been talking about. Now, unless there's like some other degree of freedom that I haven't seen in there, and they're not counting the wrist, because I think they are, because everything's going down to the forearm. So it's more like, let's count from here on up, and it's all integrated in there. So that's where the 22 comes from. And now you have what's known as a distal opposition, which is this idea that you can take your thumb and touch the tips of different fingers. Okay. Now, your pinky usually goes like this, but when you do the distal opposition, a lot of times it's very hard for the pinky to get over there. So you've got this little fold right there on your palm. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. So that means based on that, Optimus will be able to go to the palm reader and be able to look at your lifeline looks very good there. So there will definitely be a crease right there. And that's why I'm saying it's like you add that in, and now that's like 1 more. That's got to be 23. And Milan doubled down today talking about all this stuff, and we revealed a 22 doff hand. I'm like, it's not 22, it's 23. I'm sure. And so, okay, prove me wrong. Where am I getting the count wrong? I can't quite figure out where because they added a degree of freedom that I've never seen in a hand before. Now the other thing is like, why the heck do they have so many actuators? The current bot has 6 actuators. So let's not confuse degrees of freedom with motors, all right? Because you have a lot of following choice. So basically they have 1 actuator right now that pulls on the hand, and it has 2 doffs in there because they only have the 2 knuckles. And that motor goes on there So basically, those two DOFs are driven by one because they kind of follow each other. Okay. So with 23, they're not going to have 23 actuators. They're going to have a smaller number. So they could have gone from 6 to 7 because the original thought was that the bot could do this, but it couldn't do that because he didn't have individual control of that abduction.
Right.
But it looks like from what we've seen that Elon was not being truthful. Well, he didn't say it in public. He said it kind of to a private group that I had prepped ahead of time. They said, you can't do that. What's the reason for being able to do it? But it appears that maybe it can. So the so that means you need to have control of that. Now, what they do with the tendons is you pull on the tendon, and then you can't push on the tendon. Tendons are really bad in compression. So there are springs that help to open up. I mean, you can push back on it a little bit, but it's not going to do a whole lot. So they have springs in there that help it open up. So you get, for this motion, one actuator each.
Right.
Now, this one, I'm not so sure because I don't know if they have like springs that are going to make them kind of come back to the zero position. So it might be that they actually have a tendon on the left and right side of each of these that you pull on one to make it go this way, and you pull on the other to go that way. And one of them just kind of relaxes and goes up. And so that could be like 3 actuators that they have for each finger.
Wow. Yeah.
And that gives you 15.
Right.
And then you've got the one for the little hinge mechanism here, and that could potentially be the 16. And then you've got for each of the wrist, another 2 that's going to be in there. So that's a possibility. Now, the only way they could get to 22 possibly, and I've seen Sanctuary has done this with their hand, which is a little bit of a trick. So it can do the Vulcan thing, but not quite the correct Vulcan thing. They can do it like that. And see, what they did is cleverly, they said that normally when you spread your fingers out like this, your middle finger doesn't so much abduct. So they actually took away the degree of freedom right there. And the others move. And so relative to it, it looks like you're getting that.
I see.
But what it means when you do the Vulcan salute, you're kind of moving these over while that middle finger is staying straight. So I looked at it, a couple of the images, and it looks like that middle finger is flopping back and forth. So I was like, no, they're not doing it. And if they did, that might be like a patent dispute that they end up having. It's like, oh, you're not allowed to do that because we're the ones that came up with the idea of fixing that would be relative, because that way you eliminate a degree of freedom and a need for actuation to get that. But I don't think so. So, I mean, that was the only way I could get to 22 from doing that. So that's what's going on in the hand. Now, they made some changes in the wrist, and I'm going to show an animation for that I put together. So extra special.
Okay.
And I need to, once again, figure out how to share. And we're going to go ahead and share this one right here. Okay. I think you can see that right now.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. This is not exactly how the Optimus wrist looks like. I don't have access to their geometry, but it's basically the kind of mechanism that they have. And over here is the Gen 1, Gen 2 bot, where this is the big black actuator that you always see on the forearm that's used to actuate it. Now, I'm just showing this in plane. It's a bit more complicated than that because there's some out of plane motion. But the main thing is you're just going to look at how they get the pitch movement of the wrist. So I'm going to go ahead and put this into having it animate right now. Okay. So as it goes, and so if we look over here on the Optimus wrist, the current Optimus wrist, this actuator is, a cylinder with a piston, and the piston pushes up on this lever arm here that makes the palm pitch over, actuating about this point here. And in order for that to happen, you basically have a triangle. So you get 1, 2, 3 points here, and you'll see how that actuator has to move back and forth. And when you go out of plane, it's also having in another direction. So these connection points here and here are actually spherical joints so it becomes really kind of complicated to be able to do that. Now, what you can see in the image that we got from We Robot is the actuator that they have, the new actuators, and I think it might be the same diameter. It was hard to see it, and then I get another image. I think it's almost the same size, but it's like built directly into that stack where they have a bunch of other actuators going around there. So it's going on down there, and you have your normal kind of piston going up and down, but they don't want it flopping back and forth like it is over here. They want it to stay stable. So what they've done is they've added another linkage in here, a connecting rod of sorts between the piston and this lever arm that you have for making it go back and forth. So this is a 3-bar mechanism on the left. This is a 4-bar mechanism. And again, this is very crude because if you look closely at the image, you'll notice that this connecting rod is not a straight rod. It's a little bit crooked.
Yeah.
So, they try to get around from where they want to get the space and everything else. So it's designed a lot better than this. This was just something I threw together in like half an hour last night just to be able to show what's going on. But you'll see the actuator does not go back and forth. The downside is you have to add an additional linkage in here. But there's an upside in that, you've got sort of this spherical joint here, which which was there. They're basically just taking it away from here and putting it up there. So in some ways, you're not really adding complexity, and you're almost making it better because, when these things are moving around, these are connected to cables. And that means cables that flex, that go back and forth, more wear and tear. So it's like, oh, this is a little bit better. So you could argue, but we got to put another part in there. But however, it's not so bad. So this is like an improvement over it. And when I saw that, it's when I said, okay, that's not some Hollywood, thing hand from the Addams family. That is the real deal that they're doing. Yeah. And if they're talking about a 22 Dolph hand, maybe that was like a very early prototype that they were showing. And maybe they decided, that thing of the pinky, maybe we don't need that. Or maybe there's something else that's going on that they're able to do. But so that's a synopsis of what I picked up from Weebot Robot and a little bit of what's going on.
All right. On the hand, would you say that the new one, it's 22 degrees, obviously, of freedom compared to 11, which would imply more complexity. Would you say, yes. So the entire hand now is more complex than it was?
Way more. And that's a big question, is like, there's not only the fact that tendons and everything are more finicky, this hand's going to be a lot harder to put together.
Right.
Because you get all those cables and everything. And just, have you ever had like renew the brake line on your bike?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Remember,
I own the bike shop. Okay? So yeah, you go there, let the professionals do their stuff. It's just not easy to get the tension in those things right and run those things around. And now you're talking about having about 16 of them and getting them set in place. They'll work it out, but it seems to me that's like a very manual assembly task. I don't know how you automate a lot of that.
Wow.
And now what it may come down to is that this hand has enough dexterity to self-assemble itself. That's going to be the thing. Now, one other thing that I noticed that I was a little bit surprised, and again, this could be because it's a prototype, all the fingers were the same length, all of them.
Okay.
And I'm going, wait a minute. It's like,
back to that.
Why did you make you're going into all this effort with like all these actuators, just make the fingers like the same size as the human finger and don't make them all the same length. So the pinky is oversized. In my estimate, I would at least make it a little bit shorter. You could argue that, the others don't matter that much, but still,
right.
I think it's an early version. It's not the final version. There's definitely a lot of things that they're going to have to work on it, but you get kind of that preview. I'm shocked that they revealed it so soon because are you giving away your secrets, or are they going a completely different strategy? It's like, we're going to put them in there. Everyone thinks we're using tendons, but actually we got something a little bit better. So they all go down the wrong road. I don't know. There could be a head fake going on there.
Okay. And then the other point would be, if you're going to replace a part, now the new way that they're doing it, I think you've been suggesting maybe the replacement would have to be from the elbow up.
Yeah. You just don't pop on a new hand. You're going to have to pop on a whole new forearm. And so we could see that, every now and then the whole structure rotated. Now that was like a degree of freedom that's not counted in the hand.
Right.
It's that roll about the elbow where the whole thing moved around.
Okay.
Some people would say, well, that's really part of the hand. So maybe it's 24 degrees of freedom. There's a motor down there that the whole thing kind of pivots on that's connected into the elbow. Again, it's really arbitrary where you count it. And if you go online to try to ask the question of like, how many degrees of freedom does a human hand have? You will get different answers. And a lot of the reasons is because people are counting different degrees of freedom that you normally wouldn't. So for instance, a lot of them count positioning and orienting the wrist, which takes up 6 stops right there.
Right.
And to me, it's like, well, wait a minute. It's like the positioning of the hand all goes back to the shoulder. Okay. That's what makes the hand get to the position where it was. And then you can argue about that. Yes, but I have these different degrees of freedom. And do I have 2 at the wrist and then 1 down? It's like, where does the hand start and where does it end? So when everyone says, yeah, but until they get 27 tons, it's like they do, because they get the arm getting that thing there. And so you will look at, so if you take that away, a lot of people will say, 21 DOF is all you kind of need for the whole hand.
Right.
And that's taking the wrist out of it, taking all the wrist axes out of it. So just looking at the fingers and maybe a little bit of the palm, maybe it's 21. There will be some doctors and hand surgeons will say, no, it's way more. You got way more bones in there and all this other stuff that's kind of going on. It's like, yeah, okay, that's something else. But as far as the biomechanicist is concerned, when it comes to building a hand that can be pretty close and how you model it, it's going to be something like that.
So what about the question of the day that everybody was asking? We know that there was a teleoperation taking place. Tesla's come out today or yesterday and said, well, the walking around was not teleoperated, and some of the
that was very clear. So the way to look at it is that you can either compare it to like a drone, or you can compare it to like the Boston Dynamics bot and a few others that out there. Is that you have some sort of joystick controller that tells it to move forward, go left, go right, go up the stairs, and you're not robotically controlling the legs to do that. That's all being figured out by itself. Okay. Right. The same way, like, when you get on your Segway, it stays balanced by itself. All you're doing is giving it command to go forward, stuff like that. So when they're telling Optimus to walk forward, they don't have a guy in a suit walking. No. That's all controlled, because the guy in the suit doesn't understand the balance of what's going on. I mean, he could actually make it fall over if you're doing that. So it's possible there's someone that was kind of commanding it to go forward where they wanted to go, or it may have, it could have been a little bit more than that. They were like, okay, we want you to walk 20 feet straight forward. And as it's doing it, it might realize, oh, there's someone in the way. Let me kind of move over here and go around the other. Same way full self-driving goes, is that you give it a destination, and then it figures out how to navigate itself. So part of it is going to be walking, part of it is going to be navigating, because, there were other bots walking around, everything else, the terrain's going to be varying. So there's a little bit of that. So the autonomy is in things like that. And certainly they've taught a lot of these different kinds of dance moves. And they might just say, just go ahead in the dance, go and then play it. And then it probably just kind of randomly chooses what it feels like doing, going on up, just like we do. And so it would be the same thing. So it's very clear to be some of that, but anything that was like the hand motions was going on, with the bartender is rather interesting. It's still hard. I'm not sure what their telerobotic setup is like. The interaction I had, I think I got it into a joint lock or range of motion kind of error, because I think they don't have elbow trackers. So they're not coming up with the full possible solution. I basically asked Optimus to touch its nose.
I see.
Yeah, and I'm sure the operator was touching the nose, but I don't think the Optimus got there because it came to a limit error. Now, I'm going to be getting a video from Kenneth, who took it. I was able to look at it quickly. What's going? See, when I touch my nose, I think you can kind of see where my elbow is right now. Yeah, my elbow is kind of high when I do that. But Optimus was trying to do it from down low, and what ended up happening is that it ended up joint locking on that elbow down there. Now we have redundancy in our arms. Our arms are 7 degrees of freedom, which means we can reach a particular point in space by using what's called the elbow redundancy. It's actually movement of the shoulder that allows you to do that. And that means you need a tracker here. And without having a tracker there, you're just picking an arbitrary solution. So I think it was picking a solution from down here and getting locked and not able to get up to there. Yeah. It's like, well, you put a tracker on it, you just kind of go up there with your elbow and you would have been fine. You would have been able to make the touch. So yeah, range of error kind of thing. And there's some ways of doing the solutions, but they literally do something called a rule of thumb.
Okay.
It's like, depending upon which direction your thumb is, they determine which attitude the elbow should take in the solutions.
Wow.
It's my most favorite heuristic. Wow. Yeah, let's just use the rule of thumb over here. Oh, what is your rule of? It's literally rule of thumb. A rule of thumb. This is which way it's pointed.
So then Larry and I had a very long discussion the other night about the amount of supervision along the track of training. Mm-hmm. So I felt like once the bot is able to do a repetitive task or thinking about in a factory, and there's some kind of repetitive task that might have variations, but you've taught it 100 variations or 1,000 variations.
Yeah.
Starts to intuit some other variations and whatnot. But there comes a point at which that bot would require almost no supervision. But is that if I'm right, and at some point it requires almost zero supervision, is that a month-long process, a year-long process, a week-long process? What do you think at this point, based on your understanding?
The understanding from what Elon has said is they're going to put it in the factory, and then depending on how things go, then they would be sort of ready to sell to their next customers. And it looks like their customers were like, there was a bunch of CEOs there that were looking at stuff, evidently including the CEO of Stellantis. So there may be others that are saying, we could use this as well. It's probably a gradual process, and it could be one of those things that just like they have so much confidence because we don't need that. But I just think it's a gradual one that maybe phases out over a period of a year, where at first you almost have 1-to-1, and then maybe you have like 5-to-1, and then you have more confidence, and you're always going to have someone down there. Now there is something that I think Tesla could do, and maybe they're going to do, and I'm trying to get a post together on this and try to cleverly do it. It's like, I know how Tesla can increase sales for the S and X.
Okay.
And it's called Body by Optimus. And I mean, the Foundation 100%. Series, everyone bought it because it was like kind of the Foundation series. They wanted to do it. Right. So the S and X line is basically sitting there unused, running, I think, one shift a day at most, maybe 5 days a week. So it's not pumping a whole lot out.
Right.
And normally when you introduce new automation to a line, you have to stop the whole thing. You don't like it because you're not producing anything. And you're always like nervous about the new automation, how it's going to be working. So the S and X line, they definitely have something to experiment on. The thing is, S and X does not use the gigacasting. Yeah. So the whole underbody is still spot welding. It's a lot of sheet metal. So comparing all the different cars that they make, the S and X has the most press tending going on there, and the most kind of loading and loading of these sheet metal parts in for the spot. So it's like, wow. I mean, it's like they get a lot of weld stations. So there's like a lot of places, a lot of manual labor there. And if you can nail that, that's where you deploy the Optimi. And even if they're a little bit slow, it's like, oh, big deal. We just run the S and X line a little bit slower or something like that. And but you put that on the Model 3 or the Model Y, that's like a disaster, because wait a minute, we've got to make these numbers. So I think they could do that and reduce the COGS of that sufficiently that maybe it brings the cost down. But I think the most important thing is that literally market it. Because remember the old GMs, you open the car and look down, there's Body by Fisher, okay? Right. It's like everyone would love to have the thing right in the back of the car that says Body by Optimus, okay? So the whole body shop is going to be run by Optimus. That's where you can put 1,000 Optimi. Yeah. No doubt about it, is right there. And so it's like, come on. It's like, you want to sell that? I mean, it's like, I'm not sure I want to get an S and X, but you tell me that thing was built by Optimi, and you could say that there were like 1,000 that were involved in that thing. I'd say maybe I'd get in the market for an X, it's like, and I'm sure there's a lot of others that would do that, just as the novelty of saying that, damn, this thing was built by a human bot. Right. And then you just market it that way. So, all right, the idea, Body by Optimus, let's go ahead and do it. That's the place to do it. You're not going to sink the fortunes of the company. You've got to, you've got to eat your own dog food somewhere. That's the best place to do it. Yeah. And that's so much harder for everyone else. I mean, they keep on talking about the moat that Tesla has with all this different stuff. It's like, that's your moat. Okay, go ahead and use it. S and X sales are going down, so you don't really care. Yeah. The line. And the other thing is that normally it's like, oh, you bring the automation, it's going to do it. It's like, there's no retooling. There was no capital expenditure here. It's not like, we're going to switch out this station for something else. It's just like you're just replacing labor with that. You're not having to come up with new tools, new fixtures, any sort of investment. And if it doesn't work, it's like, just go back to the old way that you're doing it. So it's like, to me, it's a no-brainer. That's how you go ahead and do it.
All right, cool. Well, I've also heard online that you have had a recent conversation with Brett and over a figure, and there might have been some interesting revelations in that conversation. So share what's important.
Okay. I think I can share only what we shared in the interview that was public.
That's all.
For the most part is that Brett is quite an affable guy. He spent more time with us than we expected. And he definitely, knows his stuff. He knows what's going on with the company. It was really interesting meeting some of the other engineers that are out there that are also kind of fired up and inspired by the whole thing. He's got a competitive streak, but let's say it's he will not badmouth or trash talk the competition, even in private. I mean, you try to get him, and it's like he wants to. This is really hard to respect everyone that's doing it. He's not sure that everyone's going to make it through. He thinks some of them, are maybe married to the wrong thesis of what they want to do. But, he knows there's going to be several companies. He's pretty sure that they'll be successful, and there are others. And he knows it's like Tesla's going to be successful. It is like it's not like they're going to take them out or anything like that. It's a nice spirited competition. And the way I kind of look at it is, the quarterback for the Chiefs, Mahomes, he grew up idolizing, Brady.
Right.
And then faces Brady in the Super Bowl. So you think he's going in the Super Bowl saying like, oh, I'm just going to roll over for my childhood idol. Okay. It's like the same thing is that Brett, he respects a lot of what Elon's done. He says he was inspired by a lot of what Elon did, which is why he kind of got into all this stuff. And so in some ways it's like, oh, he's going up against his idol. He doesn't have anything bad. He's like, he owns 3 Teslas, including a Cybertruck. So he's like, and he respects the team. He knows they're going to do well. And it's just like, it's this competitive drive that your CEO better. I mean, if my quarterback goes in and you're like, oh, nah, he was my childhood idol. I'm not going to give it my all. And it's like, you're the wrong guy for the job. Okay. So, he's got the same thing. And it's not only good, that he's driving, it also drives Tesla, to know that there are others out there that, want to push them, want to get there. Quite an impressive interview that we had, and some of the stuff we saw behind the scenes I can't discuss. Yes. But otherwise, I think it's.
So actually, he went into some of that on X, and I actually had a little back and forth with him because he was like, he says he's unhappy with folks that are talking about the unlimited TAM. Because that suggests, there'll be lots of winners, which, there will be. And you just said he agrees there'll be lots of winners. But that he has no inclination to come in second, that he
no one wants to be second. Come on. If your company, if your quarterback, if your coach says, I'm fine with second place, you find someone else. I mean, the whole, so yeah, it's clear. I mean, it will be a big it could be one of those things that you just never know, that someone, finds some secret thing and then they just pump them out so quickly and no one else has a chance to catch up. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think, the only thing that could happen is that, someone just unlocks this bot really quickly and the bot can just start producing bots and just so quickly that, everyone else is caught flat. But it's not going to be that way. It's not going to be that there's a billion bots that suddenly are produced in 2028. Right. That's later on in the next decade that happens. And right now, all the bots are going to be consumed by businesses, by manufacturers, because they're willing to pay whatever it costs to get it. And it will take you just won't have the supply to go down into people's homes yet, whether it's capable of going in the homes yet also. So there's going to be a little bit before that happens. But again, it will be, as I think it's been said, gradually, then all of a sudden, that'll happen. And the same thing with the iPhone. I remember when the smartphones came out, you saw a couple of people with it, and it seemed like a gradual thing. The next thing you look around, it's like, oh my God, everyone's got one. Oh, they've got 2. So that will happen. In our lifetimes, we're kind of impatient. We want to see it like tomorrow, but definitely 2030 is almost tomorrow. We're getting pretty close to there. Let's remember that January is 2025. We're already halfway through the 20s. Thank God. I almost can't wait for this decade to be over. It didn't start out very well. Okay. And
we'll look for a fast finish.
Oh yeah. It's like, we can just put those behind us. And now I know how people felt in the 1920s. Well, no, it was like the 30s that really sucked after that for them.
Right. So any last thoughts about 1010 or about where we are on robots right now? That's just
it's interesting to see it. We know I think it was my eyes. I saw a bot that had 43 in this. So I know there's at least 43, but they didn't bring all 43 bots out. as far as we know. So we know there's at least that number. It's not the one that's there that's designed for scalability. It's designed that they can produce enough to make sure they have enough of the AI team to work with. Good progress is made. So you're seeing a lot of the hardware. Can't tell enough about what the autonomy is like and what the how far they've gone in the software. And they may have, be keeping some of that close to their chest, because that the one thing was disappointing is like, and they're showing the video of what Optimus is doing. It's like, oh yeah, there's gonna be Optimus updates. It's like, they're not showing anything on the shop floor. And I guess it's because it's like, people don't want to see anything on the shop floor. They want to see it in the home, bringing the groceries, working with, playing with the kids and doing stuff like that. It's like, okay, great. But, I want that shop floor update, because that's much closer. And maybe they just don't want to, they probably shared it with, the CEO. It's like, oh, you want to see what we're doing online right now? And they're probably like, oh. But, as far as I know, the only thing it's doing on the shop floor is like the thing with the batteries. Yeah. Because that's all we've seen. So I can't say anything that I don't know. Right. But so that's what I was hoping. I guess the other thing is like just shifting away from that is like sort of lessons learned from the debacle with Milton and Helene and storm preparedness and everything else. And everyone that keeps going on, it's like, oh, what are you going to do with the EVs when the power's out? Okay, so regarding that, you can't pump gas without electricity. Right. Yes. You also can't pump gas if you don't have gas to pump.
Oh yeah, that too.
So when I went to IFT5, I was like delaying coming back, and my son was up in Tampa, and I was asking, it's like, oh, is it okay? It's like, yeah, the water's back on, but it's oil. You get that. Electricity up in Tampa is coming on, but down here in Sarasota, it was out. I think Cern got it like just before he went on his Cybertruck. He's like, you should have left earlier, Cern. Yeah. Made it stopped at IFT5 on the way. But so it took a while for electricity to come back in a lot of places. Between Helene and this storm, my power walls have been powering the house for more than 10 days. Wow. The power came on and then it was down within an hour, because one of the connecting lines was compromised that they had. So they had to like do that. And right now they're saying, power's not. And then again, it went down for about half an hour this morning. Without power, you can't have internet.
Right.
So they're saying they'll have internet restored to where I am October 26th. Wow. And it took a long time after Helene before they got it. So basically people have been without internet for a month. Okay. I'm here and I have internet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's because of the Starlink dish. Now my Starlink dish was mounted up on the roof, and I should have taken it down, because it was definitely, the recommendation was like, oh, once you get, above 60, 70, you should take it down. And say, I'm going to, I'm putting it to the test. And I've got my weather station, which fell over in Helene. So I fortified it to make sure it didn't fall over this time. And they survived a gust of 106 miles per hour. But a lot of my roof tiles, ceramic roof tiles, did not. So I had a whole ridge that just got ripped right off right in front of the Starlink dish. The Starlink dish was there and was able to like report everything on what was going on during that time, which was incredible. So I was like one of the few people, like my neighbors were all calling up and said, can you give us access to your Ring cameras so we can see what's going on? Because the feed that they had set up went down because they lost power, they lost internet. It's like you lose those two things. So everyone just kind of poo-poos this whole idea of like, what do you need Starlink for? It's like, I had it. Yeah. It goes down for a couple seconds every now and then when it gets a heavy rain. But you know what happens to fiber after a lot of heavy rain? The darn thing is then out for hours or days.
Right.
The power is out. So the need for that. So the other thing is my son finally decided to come down and visit me because he hasn't had internet up where he is. He's been trying to deal with a hotspot. He's just like, that's it. He can't get any work done. So he had to come down. So even in Tampa, they don't have reliable internet. And the other thing is he told me not to come back because he says, there's no gas. There's like Costco was like one of the few places, it's like you say, oh, go to Costco for gas. I mean, even when there is gas, everybody goes, oh, Costco, right. Gas line. And that's what it was. And that they were, and part of it is because the Port of Tampa is where most of the gas comes into this side, and the Port of Tampa, it was compromised. So they couldn't get the gas out. So it was
Wow.
like several days without it. And I was constantly seeing messages like, on these things, that people just desperate. This thing, like, I'm down to, like, I've got 5 miles left. I've got to get gas. Where, does anyone know where it is? There's a constant please. My neighbors are having the same. Some of them have a problem. They didn't have any gas canisters to fill up so that they could have it. So EVs fared a lot better.
Yeah.
Because once electricity was stored, and with the solar, I did not have to worry about that. So again, I mean, the lessons I had is that for what everyone says that it won't work in a storm, I saw how bad it was for people with ICE vehicles, and the panic looks on their faces and the desperation when they couldn't get gasoline. And the thing is, with the solar panels, I'm able to make gas at home.
Yeah.
So if I have to, it's there. And then, the electricity there to run everything else. And again, I came back and my ice cream is still solid. There's still, everything is there, is fine.
That's my most important thing.
Because he was able to, and the funny, and again, this has happened many times, is like the storm is over and then I look at it and I'm looking at my solar production. I'm getting like 0 solar production. Like, crap. Oh no, the solar panel's compromised. They get damaged or something like that. That's why they're not working. And so it's like, yeah, but your power walls are at 100%. Like, oh yeah, last night it was like at 85%. So how did it get up to? Oh yeah, so yeah. Like, there's no place for it to go because the grid's down. Because normally it will backfeed the grid when it can't feed to that. Yeah. So then suddenly I'm going into these apps, like, turn on the AC, turn on it, So suddenly I was like, I could turn these things on because I had to drain the batteries. Otherwise, I was wasting good solar production. So, that's kind of the irony of what's going on. And I had to do that before, where I came back and it was like, I had to charge the Tesla. It's like, even though it was already close to full, it's like, you got to do something with it. Otherwise, all that's going to go to waste. Right. So for emergencies is absolutely critical. Having something like Starlink, right now, get the Starlink Mini.
Yeah.
It's the price hasn't come down yet, but it's so convenient. And I think you may have seen pictures that I brought, it slips right into my laptop bag and no problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have a little battery that will give me 2.5 hours. So I don't have to plug it in anywhere. It just fits in there. TSA had no problem. The battery had no problem with the Starlink dish, everything. So I brought it everywhere I want. And that's going into your storm kit right now. It's got to go in your storm kit. Maybe in another year or two, you don't have to, because you'll have direct to cell.
Right.
But still, if you're concerned about, any sort of emergencies coming up and you lack of communication, that's it. I was surprised at how many places in California had absolutely no internet connectivity. It's a big state, and there's a lot of places you go and you're kind of surprised, like, what? There's nothing here. There's nothing there. I mean, obviously, you're LA, San Francisco's going to be there. But once you kind of go in between, suddenly you're down. And
you get into some industrial parks. I've done this so many years. You get into an industrial park, and all of a sudden you're trying to even get Wi-Fi, and you're having a hard time even getting.
Yeah, it's not there. Yeah. One of my industrial users at a shipyard. I mean, that's what they have to use. They have to use Starlink to be able to make the connection. So, which really surprised me. I was like, wait a minute, this is a lot. It's like, you just can't. No. It's like, oh, okay. So that's what they use.
All right. Okay. Well, Scott, I think we've covered it. You said it was going to be a lot, and it was a lot. And
I didn't talk about IFT5. I mean, that was great.
Yes.
And again, I needed, that was like the perfect time because you go in an area that there's allegedly cell coverage. Of course, you go out to the pad, and there may or may not be anything there. So if you want to stream from there, you've got to bring a Starlink dish with you, which I did, and a couple of things. But then for the launch, everyone's wanting to live stream, and you've got, a beach with like thousands of people, and they all have their phones set up there, and they're all wondering why, they're not able to see the live stream. Because the cell network around there cannot handle the traffic. So I was like, whoop, popped up the Starlink dish, and both myself and Josh West 24/7 was able to stream at the same time using my Starlink Mini, and so it was great. So we're right there, had it set up. Something else to behold in what's going on. And the thing is, the launch license is good for 6 bore, and they could, if everything is good, they could by mid-November be ready to go again.
Yeah.
that's possible. So that would be the irony is that they're going to launch where the original one was saying like this is when IFT5 is going to go. Could be that early, but I suspect it probably would be later than that, unless because they're going to want to do something different. I'm not sure what IFT6 is going to be that's different and how much they need to take the lessons learned to change it, because there were still a few things that they need to fix on the reentry, on the heat tiles, and it looks like every so. I'm not sure how much they just want to do a complete rep. If they weren't ready to do a repetition, they could probably go really quickly. But if there's like some changes to the mission profile, they might want to do something else. And I'm thinking at this point, is there any value in doing exactly the same mission? I think there's only value if they're thinking of actually putting it into orbit, and then returning directly from orbit and bringing it back somewhere in the Gulf. That would be, and then they would be able to recover the booster and everything else, have better coverage for it, or the of Starship. The booster, I mean, that was so good. I don't know how they improved that, except just to check that how good the pad is. So the indicator, I haven't heard anything that there's been any pad damage. It sounds like that the pad is in pretty good shape, but it takes days to inspect this thing to make sure everything's right. If it's working well, then they might be ready to all go ahead and start doing a static fire next, because remember, the next ship is ready. That stuff's sitting around just kind of waiting to be used. And then they might do that. And then there might be a lull, because aren't they going to the next generation after the stretch version? So I think they just have like one more that's kind of like the block one, and then they're moving to the next one. And whether they'd be ready to like do that right away, or it's like, there's, because that might be why they have the second tower, because I think the second tower is stretched for the new one.
Oh, okay.
So they might be doing that, so it could be that they do this, and then there's like, maybe it's going to be a little longer. But I'd keep your eyes and ears open if anyone's thinking going down there. If you see them starting to do a static fire as early as next week, then it's like, whoa, they're going to be ready pretty quick. Otherwise, expect after Thanksgiving, after New Year, something like that.
Yeah. And Larry said that it was a religious experience to watch that baby come out of the sky and land on.
It was phenomenal, just to see it, and the excitement of everything going up. It was way more visible than I thought, because a lot of times your Falcon 9 launches, they go up and they start going downrange really quickly, and so you could quickly sort of lose some of that. And even at night with everything that's up there, the bright, you kind of lose track of it. But it was like literally like just above us. It wasn't downrange, so we could see everything quite clearly, and you never really lost sight of the booster. And when it came out, it was so big you couldn't miss it. Sometimes when the Falcon 9s come down, it's like, where is it? Because you're much further away, and the thing is much smaller. So this thing is just huge coming on down. And then to see it light up. And of course, we weren't sure at first that there was like a lot of venting of gas that you can see in the replay, that it looked like it was enveloped by this flame. It's like, something must have rutted or something like that. And it looks like, it was just a big belch. That's what it was. Is they were like probably dumping excess fuel or purging some of these lines that had to be done. And I think there are some quick fixes or lessons that they need to change, because I think some of the engine bells get overheated from reentry.
Yeah.
So they'll be looking at that, and maybe that's something that they will try to address on the next one to see if they can fix that. And if it's a quick, easy fix, then maybe that's like, let's go ahead and test this out so we know.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, good for you that you got to do both. 10. You're one of the very few that actually managed.
Yeah, and then did experience Milton at the same time. So it's like
quite a week.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Scott, thank you so much, as always, for coming on and letting us know what's going on in the world of robotics, and this time adding in some SpaceX lore to boot.
Yeah, quite a week. I mean, this week is almost like a letdown. It's like,
yeah, nothing going on. It's
nothing going on. Yeah.
All right, Scott. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.
Okay. Yeah. Bye, Randy.